let them pass. So our blood is going to crimson the creek, is it? Snarled this Mayfield. I pointed to the high hills. Up there in the mountain, I have 500 miners. They are marching armed to the meeting I am going to address. If you start the shooting, they will finish the game. Mayfield's lips quivered like a tiger's deprived of its flesh. Advance, he said to the miners. They came forward. I kept my hand on the gun. The miners were searched. There were no guns on them. They were allowed to pass. I went down the side of the hill to my buggy. The mule was chewing grass, and the little lad was making a willow whistle. I drove on. That night, I held my meeting. But there weren't any 500 armed men in the mountains. Just a few jackrabbits, perhaps, but I had scared that gang of cold-blooded hired murderers, and Red Warrior Camp was organized. The miners asked me to come up to Weinberg, a camp in the Creek District. Every road belonged to the coal company. Only the bed of the creek was a public road. At that time of the year, early spring, the water in the creek was high. I started for Weinberg, accompanied by a newspaperman named West of the Baltimore Sun. We walked along the railroad track. Again, I met the gunmen with their revolvers and machine guns. Mayfield was there, too. You can't walk here, he growled. Private property. You don't mean to say you're going to make that old lady walk that creek in the ice-cold water, do you? Said the reporter. It's too damn good for her. She won't walk it, he laughed. Won't I? Said I. I took off my shoes, rolled up my skirt, and walked the creek. At Weinberg, the miners, standing in the creek and on its edges, met me. With our feet in water, we held a meeting. Holding their shoes in their hands, their trousers rolled up, the men took the obligation to the union. I was very tired. A miner stepped up to me and asked me to come to his cabin and have a dish of tea. Your house is on private property, yelled a gunman. She cannot go. I pay rent, he protested. Private property, just the same. I'll arrest her for trespassing if she steps out of the creek. The struggle went on with increasing bitterness. The militia disarmed both gunmen and miners, but they were, of course, on the side of the Grand Dukes of the region. They forbade all meetings. They suspended every civil right. They became despotic. They arrested scores of miners, tried them in military court without jury, sentenced them to 10, 15 years in the Moundsville prison. I decided to call the attention of the national government to conditions in West Virginia. I borrowed $100 and went out and billed meetings in Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, and from these cities I came to Washington, D.C. I had already written to Congressman W.B. Wilson to get up a protest meeting. The meeting was held in the Armory, and it was packed. Senators, congressmen, secretaries, citizens. It is usual to have star orators at such meetings who use parlor phrases. Congressman Wilson told the audience that he hoped they would not get out of patience with me, for I might use some language which Washington was not accustomed to hear. I told the audience what things were happening in West Virginia, proceedings that were un-American. I told them about the suspension of civil liberty by the military, of the wholesale arrests, and the military sentences. This is the seat of a great Republican form of government. If such crimes against the citizens of the state of West Virginia go unrebuked by the government, I suggest that we take down the flag that stands for constitutional government and run up a banner saying, "This is the flag of the money oligarchy of America." The next day, by 12 o'clock, all the military prisoners but 2 were called down to the prison office and signed their own release. From Washington, I went to West Virginia to carry on my work. The day before I arrived, an operator named Quinn Morton, the sheriff of Kanawha County, Bonner Hill, deputies and guards, drove an armored train with Gatling guns through Holly Grove, the tent colony of the miners, while they were sleeping. Into the quiet tents of the workers, the guns were fired, killing and wounding the sleepers. A man by the name of Epstaw rose and picked up a couple of children and told them to run for their lives. His feet were shot off. Women were wounded. Children screamed with terror. No one was arrested. 3 days later, a mine guard, Fred Bobbitt, was killed in an altercation. 50 strikers and their organizers were immediately arrested, and without warrant. I went to Boomer, where the organization is composed of foreigners, and I went to Longacre, getting each local union to elect a delegate who should appeal to the governor to put a stop to the military despotism. I met all these delegates in a church and told them how they were to address a governor. We took the train for Charleston. I thought it better for the delegates to interview the governor without me, so after cautioning them to keep cool, I went over to the hotel where they were to meet me after their interview. As I was going along the street, a big elephant called Dan Cunningham grabbed me by the arm and said, "I want you." He took me to the Ruffner Hotel and sent for a warrant for my arrest. Later, I was put on the C&O train and taken down to Pratt and handed over to the military. They were not looking for me, so they had no bullpen ready. So a Dr. Hansford and his wife took care of me and some organizers who were arrested with me. The next day I was put in solitary in a room, guarded by soldiers who paced day and night in front of my door. I could see no one. I will give the military of West Virginia credit for one thing. They are far less brutal and cold-blooded than the military of Colorado. After many weeks, we were taken before the judge advocate. The court had sent 2 lawyers to my bullpen to defend me, but I had refused to let them defend me in that military court. I refused to recognize the jurisdiction of the court, to recognize the suspension of the civil courts. My arrest and trial were unconstitutional. I told the judge advocate that this was my position. I refused to enter a plea. I was tried for murder. Along with the others, I was sentenced to serve 20 years in the state penitentiary. I was not sent to prison immediately, but held for 5 weeks in the military camp. I did not know what they were going to do with me. My guards were nice young men, respectful and courteous, with the exception of a fellow called Lafferty, and another sewer rat whose name I have not taxed my mind with. Then from California came Abe, the great lion-hearted editor of the San Francisco Bulletin. Fremont Older sent his wife across the continent to Washington. She had a talk with Senator Kearns. From Washington, she came to see me. She got all the facts in regard to the situation from the beginning of the strike to my unconstitutional arrest and imprisonment. She wrote the story for Collier's magazine. She reported conditions to Senator Kearns, immediately demanded a thorough congressional inquiry. Someone dropped a Cincinnati Post through my prison window. It contained a story of Wall Street's efforts to hush up the inquiry. If Wall Street gets away with this, I thought, and the strike is broken, it means industrial bondage for long years to come in the West Virginia mines. I decided to send a telegram via my underground railway to Senator Kearns. There was a hole in the floor of my prison cabin. A rug covered the hole. I lifted the rug and rang 2 beer bottles against one another. A soldier who was my friend came crawling under the house to see what was up. He had slipped me things before, and I had given him what little I had to give, an apple, a magazine. So I gave him the telegram and told him to take it 3 miles up the road to another office. He said he would. "It's fine stuff, Mother," he said. That night when he was off duty, he trudged 3 miles up the road with the telegram. He sent it. The next day in Washington, the matter of congressional inquiry in the West Virginia mines came up for discussion in the Senate. Senator Goff from Clarksburg, who had stock in the coal mines of West Virginia, got up on the floor and said that West Virginia was a place of peace until the agitators came in, And the grandmother of agitators in this country," he went on, "is that old Mother Jones. I learned from the governor that she is not in prison at all, but is only detained in a very pleasant boarding house." Senator Kearns rose. "I have a telegram from this old woman of 84 in this very pleasant boarding house," said he. "I will read it." To the astonishment of the senators and the press, he then read my telegram. They had supposed the old woman's voice was in prison with her body. "From out the military prison walls of Pratt, West Virginia, where I have walked over my 84th milestone in history, I send you the groans and tears and heartaches of men, women, and children, as I have heard them in this state. From out these prison walls, I plead with you for the honor of the nation to push that investigation, and the children yet unborn will rise and call you blessed." Then the Senate took action. A senatorial commission was appointed to investigate conditions. 1 hour after this decision, Captain Sherwood of the militia, a real man in every sense of the word aside from the uniform, said to me, "Mother, the governor telephoned me to bring you to Charleston at once. You have only 25 minutes before the train comes." "What does the governor want?" said I. "He didn't say." When I got to the governor's office, I had to wait some time because the governor and the mine owners were locked behind doors holding a secret conference as to how they should meet the senatorial investigation. Governor Hatfield had succeeded Governor Glasscock, and he told me, when he finally admitted me, that he had been trying to settle the strike ever since he had been elected. "I could have settled it in 24 hours, said I. He shook his head mournfully. "I would make the operators listen to the grievances of their workers. I would take the $650,000 spent for the militia during this strike and spend it on schools and playgrounds and libraries, that West Virginia might have a more highly developed citizenry, physically and intellectually. You would then have fewer little children in the mines and factories, fewer later in jails and penitentiaries, fewer men and women submitting to conditions that are brutalizing and un-American." The next day he attended the convention of the miners that was in session in Charleston. I saw him there, and I said to him, "Governor, I am going out of town tomorrow." "Where are you going?" "I'm going to consult a brain specialist. My brain got out of balance while I was in the bullpen." "Didn't you know I was a doctor?" said he. "Your pills won't do me any good," I said. Shortly after the miners' convention, Governor Hatfield set aside all the military sentences, freeing all of the prisoners but 8. The operators recognized the Union, and many abuses were corrected. The working men had much to thank Senator Kearns for. He was a great man, standing for justice and the square deal. Yet, to the shame of the workers of Indiana, when he came up for re-election, they elected a man named Watson, a deadly foe of progress. I felt his defeat keenly, felt the ingratitude of the workers. It was through his influence that prison doors had opened, that unspeakable conditions were brought to light. I have felt that the disappointment of his defeat brought on his illness and ended the brave, heroic life of one of labor's few friends. One day, when I was in Washington, a man came to see me who said General Elliott had sent him to me. General Elliott was the military man who had charge of the prisoners sentenced to the penitentiary in the court-martial during the strike. Never would I forget that scene on the station platform of Pratt, when the men were being taken to Moundsville, the wives screaming frantically, the little children not allowed to kiss or caress their fathers. Neither the screams nor the sobs touched the stone heart of General Elliott. And now General Elliott had sent a friend to me to ask me to give him a letter endorsing him for Congress. "And did General Elliott send you?" "Yes." "Then tell the General that nothing would give me more pleasure than to give you a letter, but it would be a letter to go to hell, and not to Congress." End of chapter 18.